Hi.
Hey, how are you? Nice to see
Good.
you.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Where are you in California?
I'm in Los Angeles, coming to you direct from sunny, beautiful Los Angeles. And
Nice.
congratulations, Arthur, on your book, bestseller, instant bestseller. So
Thank you.
exciting.
Oh, it's so exciting. I mean, it's like I'm so happy to talk about happiness and have people sharing the love that this can actually bring at this time in America. What a privilege it is.
What, are you surprised at how well it's done so fast?
I guess I shouldn't be, but you always are. You write
Yeah.
books. No, exactly. But I guess when you write a book that says, here are the 7 secrets that the happiest people when they get old have, and the mistakes that people make along the way. I mean, I guess people are going to be interested in that, right?
So the book, let me just say, is called From Strength to Strength. And it says finding success, happiness, and deep purpose in the second half of life. And I started the book yesterday. I could barely put it down, but I have a question for you, Arthur. I
Yeah.
want to know, why is this about the second half of life? Shouldn't it be our generation's job, since we've messed up so many other things, to say to young people, make this your job in life. Don't wait until the second half of your life to find deep purpose, to find deep meaning.
Absolutely, Maria. And this is actually the course that I teach. I'm very privileged that the course that I teach at Harvard is on happiness in the first half of life. And as I was teaching this course, and as I've been thinking about this as a social sciences for the past 10 years, I realized there isn't very much out there for people who are starting the second half of their life. And by the way, the second half of your adult life starts at about 55. It's not like you're 30 or something. And the problem is that about the last 35 years of your life, most people think, I hope it turns out okay. I'm hoping for the best. And it turns out there's an amazing number of investments that each of us can make all along the way, 25 or 45 or 65, that remarkably change the odds of being much happier at 75 than we were at 25. It blew my mind.
I think it's so great because I talk to so many young people who say to me now, I look at your generation. I don't want to work like your generation, meaning I don't want to devote 7 days a week to climbing up this ladder. I don't want to have the kind of lives that you guys live. I want to live a life of meaning, of purpose. I want to find a different way to live. This is really a roadmap for every decade of life, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the sooner that people start, the people who are watching us who are in their 20s and 30s, the sooner they start putting together their happiness 401k, the
Yeah.
happier they're going to get all throughout their lives. I mean, the earlier you start, the greater the payoff is. It's an amazing thing.
I love that you wrote today in the Atlantic, and I have to say I read your pieces all the time. We share them in the Sunday paper all the time. Your pieces on satisfaction, dissatisfaction, less happiness. So if you don't follow Arthur's column at the Atlantic, please do, or just know that we always reshare it in the Sunday paper, because there's always something in there that you can take away and implement in your day-to-day life. But I love this idea of a happiness 401k. And you really boil it down for people, Arthur, to say, here are 7 things to invest in your 401k if you want to be happy and to feel a sense of meaning and purpose at all of these junctures, but particularly in your second half of life. Can you walk us through the 7?
Sure. The first 4 are pretty obvious. They're taking care of yourself in a meaningful way. A lot of the mistakes that people make is they think, look, I'm young, I'm resilient. But the truth of the matter is that the sooner you take care of yourself in very fundamental ways, if you're smoking, you should quit. Be very careful about your alcohol use, for example. You need moderate exercise. You need to eat right. These are the basics. And as often as we've heard them, we need to hear them and rehear them again. When I was 25 years old, I wish I had paid a little bit more attention. Fortunately, I did stop smoking when I was 26 years old. It was a mistake to do it until then, but I did, thank goodness. And people need to be reminded of these things. The last 3 are a little bit less intuitive. One of them is to work on your resilience in the face of distress. And I give some ideas on that in the column today, but the book is really full of ideas on how we can become more resilient emotionally, so we're not ruminating on sources of distress, so that we can do something we call to become metacognitive, which is to say, don't let your emotions manage you, but rather be conscious of them so you can manage your emotions. And I walk through the specific steps on how we can do that. There are also ideas that we talk about in this, and I talk about in the column, and I talk about in the book, about the single most important ingredient in getting old well and being happy all throughout life, which is love, is tending to our relationships, is tending the root system below us. You know, so many people from our generation, but from younger generations as well, they have lots of friends, but they're deal friends. They're not real friends. You have to categorize these things and build these relationships. And in so doing, this is the best insurance.
Yeah, you talk in the book, which I think is so interesting, about the striver's curse. And I think certainly in this country, but we raise children and we are raised to strive, to be excellent, to be successful. People want to be successful. And you say those that have that quality of wanting to be successful actually struggle the most as they get older. So talk a little bit about the striver's curse and how to avoid it.
Yeah, the biggest mistake that we tend to make is we say, look, if I'm really successful, I work hard, I play by the rules, you know, I have my nose to the grindstone, I don't stop, it's all going to be okay. Then I'll finally get my goals and that will give me permanent satisfaction. And the truth of the matter is that everybody struggles. The sacrifice and sadness, it reaches all of us. But strivers have a special kind of struggle because it turns out that it's not enough just to hit your worldly goals. You, like people say, money, power, pleasure. The real four are faith, family, friendship, and work that serves other people. And so strivers, they don't learn that sometimes too late.
So, you know, I think that that's so interesting for people who are parenting now, right? And they tell their kids, you know, go to college, do really well, make money. We laud people who are on the covers of magazines, who make a lot of money, who are famous. And do we have it all backwards?
We really do. We absolutely do. I mean, look, part of the problem is not just the entertainment industry, which gives us these corrupt messages about what will make us happy in life. Part of it is the structure of our brains. Mother Nature, I mean, is wonderful in so many ways, but Mother Nature doesn't care too much if we're happy. Mother Nature wants us to be successful and pass on our genes. We have to be responsible for our own happiness, and that is critically important for us to understand. So your brain is saying, get famous, get rich, be successful, be powerful. And we have to remember, no, the ultimate sources of satisfaction, the habits, the 4 habits of the happiest people are boiled down to just 4 things. Cultivate your faith or your philosophical life about the world. Work on your family life. Don't let those ties fall away. And especially don't let your family life break down over stupid things like politics, for Pete's sake. Cultivate real friendships, not just deal friendships, and dedicate your work, whether your work is staying at home, taking care of your children, or working in the community, or working in a market-based job, doing anything. Dedicate that work to earning your success, lifting other people up, and serving the world. If you do those 4 things, the world is really yours.
You talk about kind of real friends, and we hear so much about the loneliness epidemic that is kind of sweeping our country, the anxiety epidemic. People have their friends through social media, but not, whether it's because of this pandemic or other reasons, they themselves are lonely. How do people rectify this now in their lives? When it comes to friendship and when it comes also to anxiety. You said you have to learn how to manage your emotions, and we're inundated with everything that's making us fearful, anxious. You know, the world is coming to an end. There's, you know, political insecurity, global insecurity, inflation. All of these things don't help us manage our emotions.
It's so true. Loneliness is a real, as you suggest, it's an epidemic in our country, and it's gotten so much worse during the coronavirus epidemic. Now, the real problem, believe it or not, there's a chemical in our brains called oxytocin that we produce in response to eye contact and touch with other people. If you're in a lockdown situation, you're not seeing people, even outside your immediate family, you're going to have a scarcity of that. It's intensely uncomfortable. You won't be able to quite say why I'm so unhappy. The trouble with it is that it actually makes it harder for you to do the right thing. What I recommend to people is stay off too much social media. 30 to 60 minutes a day maximum of social media, because you don't get oxytocin from that. It's kind of like the burgers and fries of social life. It's junk food. It's good to do a little. What we're doing right now is passing on information. But if you're trying to get your company from it, it's a problem. You need all kinds of opportunities to, I recommend, if you can, if you live with somebody, a 22-second hug every 2 hours as a matter of therapy. That will increase your blood oxytocin levels. And by the way, it'll probably help your marriage if you're married. I also recommend direct eye contact when talking. Maria, I'm looking at you in the eyes right now. It's giving me pleasure. The reason is because we get oxytocin when we do this. It's critically important that we take care of ourselves, that we take care of our brains. And the way that we link together in bonds of love, that's the most important thing that we can do right now for ourselves.
Are you talking, Arthur, do you think like you're talking about faith, you're talking about connection, you're talking about purpose and meaning in work? And some people might say to you, well, you know, like we're looking at record low levels when it comes to going to church, for example. We're looking at record low levels of actual human contact. We're looking at people who want to make billions of dollars by the time they're 30 and then crash when they don't, because they have these kind of, you know, my kids are always coming, this person just made X amount of money from NFTs. This person just started a company, it's valued at X amount of thing. I feel like I'm doing nothing. Right. The comparisons that people are dealing with right now, and I think the lack of faith, or maybe it's the lack of attending religious services. Are you worried about where we are as a culture, where we are as a society?
Absolutely. You know, there's a very famous author named David Foster Wallace who one time, and he was not a religious guy, but he said something very, very adroit, which was that everybody worships something. Now, there's this formula that our society has gotten into. It's a very simple formula. It says, here's how you're going to be happy, Maria. Here's how you're going to do it. You're going to have to use people, love things, and worship yourself. But that's exactly wrong, because the nouns and the verbs are messed up. It's what we're hearing from the entertainment industry and from media. It's what we're hearing from the economy. Here's what we need to do. Just mix up the words a little bit differently, and you get the true formula for happiness. It's all we need to remember. Use things, love people, and worship the divine. Those are your 3 jobs in life. Use only things. Just use the things. Love only people, because only people should be loved, and worship the divine, and pay attention to these things and watch your happiness grow.
I've found that I've just done this summit about reframing aging. And for people, because I have found that I talk to a lot of people who are in their 50s and 60s who are terrified of aging, right? Because they think like what society has told them about aging is that they're not going to be relevant, that they can't get a job, that they have no meaning, that they're discarded, that they will be lonely. How do we have to change this whole image of what it means to age in our society?
So the book that we're talking about here, it was a major revelation to me, because one of the things that I have always seen is that there are kind of 2 kinds of successful people early in life and people late in life. The early bloomers are kind of the Elon Musks, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the innovators. Later in life are kind of the Dalai Lamas. You know, they're the people who are the Pope Francises. You know, those are the people who are the great sages. Well, it turns out that everybody gets 2 success curves in life. Early on, you're a striver, you're working your way up, you're adding to your life. Later on, you take things away, and what you uncover is the master teacher within. If we all want to actually find more success, more happiness, more purpose in our lives after the age of 45 and 50, we need to stop thinking about trying to do the stuff we were doing at 25 and 30, and we need to find the sage, the teacher, the historian, the person that can take many ideas and explain them to new people, to become a mentor, to help others. It doesn't mean in the marketplace necessarily. We can do it with our kids and grandkids or in our communities, but to see yourself as a teacher, then you will be truly indispensable. And that's what we need more of as a society, and that's what each of us needs to dedicate our lives to doing.
Was there a point in your own life where you were like, I'm now moving into the sage space, and I like it.
Yeah.
I feel at ease here. This is what I've actually meant to do.
Yeah, and the thing is, we want to rage against the thing that's actually going away. Everybody regrets the thing that they can't do as well, as opposed to looking through the front of the car to see what's coming toward us, which is so wonderful. So for years, I thought, it's kind of funny. I used to do a lot of very technical research, because I'm a college professor, and I would do things that I found that I can't even read the stuff that I used to write 20 years ago. But then I thought about it. I said, my teaching's getting better and better. I get to teach, hundreds of students every year about happiness at Harvard University, and they're going to go forth and become happiness teachers themselves if I do my job. And I'm getting better at it. And I think, you know what? That's what I want to do anyway. What do I want to write? Technical stuff nobody can read, or teach people about happiness? With my column and with my classes, I get to talk to you about happiness. What intense pleasure that is. And I'm better at it at 57, way better than I would have been at 37. And you know what? The data tell me, I'm looking at the data, I'm going to be better at 77 than I am now.
What's the biggest misconception we get about happiness? I have to say that I grew up thinking, oh, I want to be happy. If I do well in my journalism career and I'm successful, I'll be happy. But nobody told me that happiness kind of ebbs and flows, that you can have happiness and grief in one day.
Right.
You can wake up kind of down, then you can get happy, then you kind of even out. And that this kind of like, go out and be happy, and once you get it, you're going to keep it all the time, is kind of a false narrative. It's a false promise.
Yeah, it sure is. That's a kind of a psychological hedonism. And it's not even good, because we all want the full range of experiences. We want to be fully alive, don't we? The biggest.
Well, I don't think people tell you like, gee, I really want to be grieving, or gee, I really want to be sad. People don't really teach you at a young age what you can learn from sadness, what you can learn from grief, what you can learn from failure. I mean, we begin, and you're writing about that, what we can learn from having less. But this is kind of new.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and look, you and I are Catholics, and so, you know, we talk sacrifice.
That the whole second half of life, you're trying to undo everything that you grew up with. The guilt is, oh my God.
I know, but it's so sweet. It's so good too. But you know, here's the biggest mistake that people make, especially young people. I ask on the first day of class, what's happiness? And one after the other, they talk about feelings. Happiness is not feelings. That's like saying your Thanksgiving dinner is the smell of the Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving dinner has a smell, but it's not the same thing. Happiness has feelings, but happiness is something much different. Happiness is basically like if you would ask, what food actually has 3 macronutrients: protein, carbohydrates, and fat. That's what all food is made of. Well, happiness has 3 parts too. The first part is enjoyment, the second part is satisfaction, and the third part is meaning. And meaning is the hardest part of all, because meaning requires unhappiness. Meaning requires suffering. Meaning requires pain to actually find. You know, we are resilient because of the things that we've gone through.
That. What do you mean meaning requires pain? Meaning requires sacrifice? Explain that.
So one of the things when I ask people, when did you get the greatest meaning of your life? When did you learn about the purpose of your life? They never say that great week at Disney World. No, that's not what they say. They talk about a time when they lost somebody that they loved, or they were afraid about something in their business falling apart, or when their child was sick and they didn't know what to do, but then they realized that they were strong. Pain actually helps us to understand the strength that we have within, and in so doing, it helps us to come up with the meaning and purpose in our lives. Now, we don't want too much, and I never say don't go looking for suffering, because it will find you. It's going to find each one of us. The key thing is using it in a way so that we are fully alive, and then helping other people who are suffering. That's where we find our meaning. And if we can't get that, look, my students, so many of them dedicate their lives practically to not suffering. And that's a huge mistake, because in avoiding pain, to avoid your unhappiness, paradoxically, you're avoiding a big part of your happiness.
What moment of suffering taught you your happiness?
You know, there's been, well, I brought up teenage kids, so let's put it that way. And it was really, there were some scary times. I mean, there was some very scary times. I have a deployed combat Marine as one of my kids, and it's scary. You don't know, when you don't hear from your child for months at a time, actually what it's going to be. And my kids have been sick, and you know, one of my children almost died when he was a baby, and it was a scary time in intensive care for a long time, and I didn't know. And there have been times when I've lost people in my family. My parents died very young, and there have been moments of intense regret where I wished I'd been closer to my parents than I always intended to be. And then they passed away, and I felt like it was too late. But then I got a second chance, because I have my own adult children, and I do have a second chance. And these were the things that the lessons from the pain, from the sacrifice, from the fear that I felt, that actually give me the intense meaning in my life. These were not enjoyable times. These were the meaningful times, and that's what I prize the most.
Arthur, how important do you think it is today to step back and sit in silence, sit in quiet, away from distractions, to really have these conversations first and foremost with yourself. What brings me meaning? What am I actually unhappy about? What can I change? How do I begin to develop my 401k for happiness? These kinds of things, because they're not really, I mean, we can read your book and listen to you as I do, but aren't these ultimately kind of personal odysseys?
They're intensely personal, and they require that we do the work. Many people say, I wish I were happier. But if you told me I wished I knew more mathematics, I'd say, well, go get a book. You got to do the work. You can't just wish for it. And happiness is the same thing. The most important skill that we can develop in trying to become happier people is this idea of metacognition. Feelings, most feelings, they originate in a part of the brain that's very ancient, very animal, called the limbic system of the brain. But when we sit in silence, when we think about our emotions, when we contemplate the things that we're going through in life, when we journal, when we describe to other people what's happening, when we do the work, it moves it to the more human part of our brains where we can manage these ideas, where we can create a strategy for the way that we want to live. But if we basically say, I hope I feel better, well, that's just like hoping, it's like hoping you'll win the lottery. It's a much better strategy to do the work to become prosperous than simply buying a lottery ticket every day. And
Yeah.
meditate.
That's what I really love about this book. As you said, there hasn't been a lot about the second half of life because our parents' generation, right? They died earlier. People
Right.
were sick earlier. We now know a lot more about how to stay healthy longer. And people aren't thinking of retirement in their early 60s, right? They're thinking about this whole second half of life. How can I continue not to be the striver, but to live a life of meaning and purpose, regardless of my age?
No, that's right. These are questions that most of our parents didn't really ask, and they felt that it was almost a conceited thing to ask. But in point of fact, these are the things that we do need to ask. These are the questions for the proper management of our own happiness in our lives. And one of the best things that we can do in asking these questions is being able to pass on these ideas to others. Look, we have a world that's very troubled. We have a world where there's a lot of sadness, where there's a lot of pain, and each of us can relieve that pain. The best way that we can do so is by learning how to be happier people, to share that. I mean, that's an act of love. And at the end of the day, it's a very interesting truth that if you knew one thing about happiness, is that happiness is love. And love is about sharing what is truly important and good. If you've got the secrets, passing them on is the ultimate act of love to other people. So why wouldn't we learn more?
Yeah, I love that because I look at that as part of my passion, my purpose, right? To share what I've learned along the way, bring people's ideas to the forefront, have these kinds of conversations, because I wish many times that when I was in my 20s or 30s, striving, that I had the ability to hear a conversation like this. I don't know whether it would have landed, but it might have changed the trajectory of how I work and how I live. So are you trying to reach people in their 30s, their 40s, or are you really focused on the people in the second half of life?
This is about the second half of life because I know that people in the first half, they can do so much. This is a crystal ball look into what happens in the second half of life and how we can affect that trajectory. Look, we don't have to leave it up to chance. I can't promise that with the science of happiness and with the truth that comes from ancient wisdom and practicing our faith and loving other people, that each one of us will be blissful at every moment. Of course we won't be. Life comes at you fast, and all of us have different experiences. Some people have a lot of pain, I get it, but all of us can be happier. And especially we can make other people happier. This is a book for people at every age to make the investments in themselves that, frankly, the world needs them to make.
What would you say to somebody who just lost their job, right? Who's maybe 60 and they got, their law firm said, we have retirement age, you're out.
Yeah.
The accounting firm said, we've got a young person in here, you're a journalist, and they said your healthcare is too expensive, and so on and so on. And they're sitting there going like, oh my God, I didn't invest in my 401k of happiness. I worked all the time. My marriage fell apart. I've lost touch with my friends. It's over for me.
Yeah. The one thing that nobody should ever do is to give up, because there's so much more that we can do. Love can start at any age. When we start investing in other people in these relationships, we can actually get tremendous returns no matter when we start. The problem that a lot of people have is that they're stuck in the past on money, power, pleasure, and fame. And if we start to migrate our portfolio, our investment portfolio, not from these false four to the good four at any age, to work on our spiritual path. Look, I know people who at age 60, 65, 70 have discovered the spiritual realities that have changed their life permanently, to work on the family relationships that can be repaired. I mean, my own father-in-law came back in the life of my wife's family very late in life, and he was forgiven and he was accepted, and he died loved. Even did he deserve it? I don't know, but everybody wanted to love him. People want to love. Your friendships, start making real friends, not just deal friends. You can do that at any age, and then start doing the work, whether it pays you or not, to lift people up, to bring people together, to serve other people. This is the investment portfolio. 60, 70, 80, start now. You'll never be sorry.
Your column is called How to Build a Life, and you just talked about your father-in-law coming back into life. And at the beginning of the interview, you talked about so many people who've lost friends and family members, perhaps due to political differences. When you're thinking about how to build a life of meaning, a life of purpose, a life of relationships, and you have estrangements in your family, you have political differences, and people say, like, I don't know where to start to find my way back home.
Yeah.
Since you're the authority, how do people find their way back to relationships, find their way to a life that you're describing, other than reading the book? And I suggest you read the book, because I have dog-eared the entire book that I've read so far.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate it so much. How do we do that? You know, what's that? The answer is with people. Look, we're so prideful in our relationships, and I understand why it's so hard to forgive, but we all have to remember that we all have things to forgive, and we all need to be forgiven as well. The act of forgiveness is an act of self-love. The act of forgiveness is love for others as well. But ultimately, it's a way that we can give ourselves the peace and relief that we need. This was what happened when my father-in-law came back in the picture, and my wife and I, we talked about it. And she said, I'm having a hard time forgiving, but I need to forgive because I can't carry this any longer. I can't carry this bitterness. I can't carry this anger any longer. And she forgave him, and the relationship was, they talked openly. It was beautiful, I have to say. And I developed a relationship with my father-in-law, and it was really an extraordinary thing. But it started with my wife's recognition that she just needed to forgive because she wanted to be happy.
And you talk also in the book about kind of vulnerability and being open, and many of the qualities that help you later in life are the ones you protect yourself from early in life. And
right.
You talk about, really having to make a turn in midlife if you want what you're advocating, right? How difficult is it to make these turns of, like, if you're a striver, you're tough, you're aggressive, you don't pay any heed, and then all of a sudden you're 55 and now you have to be, I'm sorry, I'm humble, I'm open, I'm painful, it's like you're having to be two different people in a way you're advocating, right?
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's really, really hard jumping from one curve to another. I'm telling you, it was hard for me. But, I wrote this book starting 8 years ago, and it wasn't intended to be a book. It was look, I'm a social scientist, and I made a notebook of my strategic plan for the rest of my life based on all the information and research. And I was carrying around in a notebook, and my wife, Esther, she looked at it, she said, you're not going to keep that to yourself, are you? You got to share that thing. And it was intensely difficult for me to take my own advice. But I tell you, Maria, I stepped down from a job that was on the big wheel, on the hamster wheel, that was all, striver, running as much as I possibly can. I stepped down from it. I took a different job where I could teach, where I could share these particular ideas that actually played to my strengths in this part of my life. And I ate my own cooking, and it turned out to be okay. I'm happier. I'm a happier man than I was 3 years ago. I'm so much happier, as a matter of fact. I can't believe it. I mean, I was thinking today, I get to go on Instagram and talk to Maria Shriver about happiness. I get to share these ideas, and like, it's crazy. It's like this is what I do for a living, that is insanity. And everybody can find a greater passion in the way that they share and love other people, but it requires a commitment to change. It requires a commitment to say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to be happy. I've decided that I'm going to do what it takes to be a happier person, to share more, and to love more. And it's really helpful to have a partner in this, by the way. My wife was really on board with this. She was really helpful to me. And I had friends around me, including, by the way, your brother, Mark, was very helpful to me. He was my next door neighbor for 10 years.
Okay, it's his birthday today, Arthur. It's his birthday.
I'm going to tell him happy birthday as soon as we're finished here. But he was, very supportive. I remember telling him, I'm thinking of doing this thing. And he said, that's so beautiful. That's so great. Why? Because he's the guy who gets it.
Yeah. I think the other thing you said in the book, which I really liked, is you said it's also very difficult for people who have been striving, who are maybe at that midpoint in their life, to know when to step down.
Yeah. To
make the shift, because everything that you've used to get there wants to keep you there.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Oh, yeah. No, your whole being. Remember, Mother Nature wants you to strive. Mother Nature wants you to go insane on this treadmill so that you can be really, really good at passing on your genes and all the stuff that the animal kingdom wants you to do. But you're responsible for your happiness. Now, it's a really interesting thing. I'm a Christian, and I believe that there's all kinds of animal stuff in our lives, but we have free will because we're people. And we can actually engage in this, and it's a blessed and important thing for us to actually engage in our own happiness and lift other people up. And so to say, yeah, I've got these urges and I'm not going to act on them. It's an act of power. It's an act of metacognition. I'm using my human brain instead of just my animal brain. And every single person watching us, when they have these negative emotions, they don't have to say, another bad day. I have the urge to do something I shouldn't do. They can contemplate these things. They can journal these things. They can share these ideas, and they can manage these ideas. Because ultimately, people talk about being a leader of a company, being a leader of, the most important leadership is to be the leader of me, Inc. And it starts with actually managing myself.
So what if people could say, that's really selfish, me, Inc., right? Yeah. I have responsibilities. I can't just go and say, I want to be happy. I have 3 kids. I have, school bills. I have all kinds of bills on the table. I can't just go and be like, me, Inc.
Well, your kids need you to be the manager of yourself. Your community needs that. The people in your church need that. Your spouse needs that. It's very important for the people who love you to see you as a good example. Now, the most important thing that your kids can learn from you is watching you manage yourself to be the CEO of you, Inc., because you want them to be the CEO of them, Inc. That's the most important thing. And one of the things that you actually see in the research, it's very interesting, is that the children who are most reactive, the children who feel most out of control with their emotions, they learned that from their parents, who tend to be out of control with their emotions. So it's not selfish at all. The most selfless, generous thing that you can do is to actually, with your children, show them how you manage yourself, and they can manage themselves too.
And I think, Arthur, also, you're perhaps advocating also to sit down perhaps and explain what does it mean to be the manager of you, Inc., right? And
absolutely.
You, Inc. includes others, is for the benefit of others as well as oneself. This is always the fine line, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. I often think people think of themselves as kind of a solitary tree growing majestically in the forest, but ultimately alone. Well, I remember one time I was looking at an aspen tree, the beautiful aspen tree out in Colorado, and a botanist, a scientist told me, you realize that that's not a plant. That's not one plant. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, aspen groves are one plant. They have the same root system. The largest living organism in the world is an aspen grove in Utah called Pando. That's 106 acres of aspen trees, and it's literally one plant. It's an illusion to think that in managing myself, I'm all by myself. On the contrary, if we want to feel more in touch with the reality of the situation, don't look in the mirror and say, this is me alone. Look from side to side. I mean, I'm looking at you, Maria, and we have common roots. It's so important because we're all sisters and brothers in the world. Look at the little guy next to you, your son. He's part of the same root system. He's just another shoot off the root system. So managing you is ultimately managing the organism that is the beautiful body of human life.
And raising, I suppose, young people not to should, not to, they have to do this or they should do that, but to cultivate within them what brings them purpose, what brings them meaning, where is their happiness, where does their joy come from,
Yeah.
and to also teach them that in suffering, in pain, comes great insight, comes great revelation, comes great awakening, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that a mistake that we often make in our lives, especially for strong people, or brave people, or just in front of our kids, is that we never show our suffering. We never show our weakness. It's a real mistake to do that. It's so interesting that some of the greatest leaders, St. Paul the Apostle, he talked about the fact that in my weakness, I find my strength. He talked about the thorn in his flesh, maybe the greatest entrepreneur in human history. It was actually, this guy who's going around talking about his pain and his weakness. We need to do that so that people can see that part of human life is the ups and the downs, and we can manage those things and understand that the beauty within actually comes from all of our experiences.
In my weakness is my greatest strength. That's a great place to leave it with St. Paul. I hope everybody will go and get this book, Arthur Seabrook's From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And we will have this up in the Sunday paper as well this Sunday, so you can read it, hear it. And it's really an extraordinary book. I'm so happy that you wrote it, Arthur. I love reading everything that you write. I find it so thought-provoking and helpful. Really, I wrote a book about how to build a meaningful life. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we're all here to do, is how to build our very own meaningful life. And that's drowning out other people's shoulds and advice all the time. But I think giving us a roadmap for the second half of life is exactly what millions and millions of us need, so that we can better grandparent and pass on the advice that these other generations so desperately need. So thank you so much for doing this hard work and sharing the hard work with all of us.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for the love that you're bringing to so many people, the ideas that you're bringing on how we can all love each other more. Let's stay in the fight for greater happiness, and let's spread the love to everybody we can.
Amen. Thank you so much, Arthur. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.